Madam Deputy Speaker, there are a number of issues which were raised this week as a result of the debate which has happened around Close the Gap, not all of which have been addressing the Close the Gap targets directly. But what I want to do is just concentrate for a moment on some of the issues we're outside of the Close the Gap targets, but which are fundamental if we ever to meet those targets. And they are related to the social determinants of health in particular, but of other outcomes. So how do we expect to have a healthy young child if we don't have adequate housing? And I think it's a question which all health economists appreciate, and those involved in prevention, those addressing the highest rates of rheumatic heart disease in the world that are in this country understand that if we don't address the housing problem, we're not going to address the health problems. If we don't address the health problems, we won't get the education and outcomes we're after. Very simple, in my view. Yet this week, we've had confirmed that this Prime Minister and his government have said that they will not renew the Commonwealth's commitment to remote area housing, to the Remote Housing Agreement, that in the case of the Northern Territory, instead of matching the $1.1 billion trumped up by the Northern Territory government for the next 10 years, they are prepared to provide funding for 2 years only, transitioning out of supporting the Northern Territory community in the provision of remote area housing. In the case of Queensland and the other jurisdictions, they've said at the end of June this year that'll be the end of their relationship with those in terms of investments in those states for remote area housing. Now that raises a very serious question, because if we are ever to address all of those comprehensive Close the Gap targets, if we don't improve the housing outcomes for Aboriginal people in remote Australia, we will not meet those targets. It's plain and simple. The government says, well, we're concerned this is a state problem. It is not a state problem, it's a national problem. And we as a parliament and this country is embarrassed by the fact that this government has chosen to withdraw its support from the most needy community in the world, almost, in the context of housing for and prevention of diseases like rheumatic fever, that if we don't do that, we're going to see a continuing escalation of rheumatic heart disease, a continuing escalation of diabetes and renal failure, a continuing escalation in other health issues that confront Aboriginal people who live in remote parts of this country on a daily basis. Now, you don't have to be Einstein to work this out. Most informed people in the community would be able to tell you this is the inevitable outcome of the failure of the government to agree to be involved in that discussion.